hope you all had a very nice day. It's been a long day full of talks. This is the last round, or the second to last round, so drinks soon, freedom. And today I want to share a little bit about my personal experience as a teacher. So the last, well, a year before I started at Lab Digital, but before that I was a teacher for over 10 years in various settings. And I want to share with you what I learned there and what I think that works, and also how to bring it into practice in your own company or in your own daily work. I'm today representing Lab Digital. I'll talk a little bit more about what we do and who we are. And let's have a good time. So one of my main problems is that I tend to talk very fast, especially if I'm enthusiastic about stuff. So if that happens, just raise your hand and say slow down. I'm used to it, that's fine. So what we're gonna do today, I'm gonna talk about my background as a teacher, how I came here, what I learned. Why you should care about teaching, right? It's quite an important question if we're gonna talk about teaching. Tips on how to teach, some practical things that have worked for me, but also how you can develop your own teaching style and how you can be a better teacher in general. Teaching and AI, because I cannot not talk about AI today. It will be short, and I have some thoughts about it. Some practical tools that you might be able to use. We might skip that depending on the time. And if you have some questions left in the end, I'm there for you. My background as a teacher. I started out teaching kids. This was my first initial experience teaching. Actually, not my first. Before that, I was a teaching assistant at university. But after that, I started a company where we aimed at teaching primary school kids how to code. Often with a robot. You can see me sitting there, middle of a classroom. And I highly recommend everyone that is doing development in their daily lives to try this. There's various initiatives you can join. Code Dojo, Code Kids, there's Day of Code. It's amazing to see how much joy it can bring to the face of a kid if they get to make a website or get to like build a robot. Highly recommend it to anyone to try that. Doesn't matter if you're experienced or not, you don't have to be a super good teacher, it's just a great experience. So that's where I started out. And I'm gonna come back to these kids soon because it's actually quite relevant what I learned there. After that, after various endeavors, I ended up as a teacher at a bootcamp, a coding bootcamp. These used to be super popular a couple of years ago when the market wasn't shit like it is today for juniors. And we would train people from various backgrounds, from various nationalities, to become what we would call like full stack developers. To be honest, it's more like front end, and I know what an API is. So in 10 to 11 weeks, we would teach this. And after that teaching and after the course, the students would go out to find jobs. And if they did, we as teachers would also join them sometimes to like consult in the companies, help them onboard, make sure that they land properly, because it's quite hard thing to do for companies to like onboard juniors properly. So this talk will mostly be like a collection of experience I had there, and most of these things I've seen work independently, but I've never seen the full package, and I want to like present you the full package. There is a small disclaimer. I will talk a lot about like seniors and juniors, right? Like these developer levels. And I think that it's a bit dangerous because everybody has their own definitions of those, right? And even between companies, it might vary quite a lot what company A considers a senior or company B. So it's really about the difference in knowledge on a specific level. So you might be a senior on React, but maybe not on Express, or you might be a senior on, I don't know, GraphQL and not on REST APIs. Like it's about the relationship in knowledge between two people. So one is the more senior person, but the other is the more junior person. Currently, I'm becoming an engineering manager at Lab Digital, and we are hiring. I must say that Lab Digital as a company is a really great place to work. We really value culture, and we really value learning. My personal experience is that I was very surprised about this from Lab Digital, and we are an e-commerce company, right? We build web shops. But we're a really cool place. We have a lot of very passionate people that all love and breathe tech. Really check us out if you're looking for a job or you know people that are, and you're willing to put in the effort. It's a really good place. So everything that I'm going to talk about you today, I'm also going to try to implement at Lab Digital at some point in the future. At least that's my goal. Let's see where we get. So why do you care about teaching? So let's do a raise of hand. Who has worked at a company where onboarding was perfectly organized? Wow, that's one. That's great. What was the secret?
Everything just worked.
Everything just worked. Like a developer comes. So I often define like onboarding perfectly arranged as was there commit on day one for a new developer?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really cool. So that's what I'm aiming for, right? Like that's what we want to see when we have like onboarding. I want to make like have a developer come in and preferably on day one be able to commit something to the code base. Right? It doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be a major rewrite, but like a small feature or a small like comment or some documentation, I would like to be there. So that's my first question. So who has worked on a project that had perfect documentation? That's 0, nice, right? So everybody knows these problems, right, that we have. Companies really struggle with this, and I think it's universal, not only in tech, by the way. I think that a lot of companies struggle with knowledge management, how to keep knowledge like spread across the company, right? How to avoid like knowledge islands. It's all very, very common. So I think that teaching can offer some sort of solution, and I'm going to explain why I think that, and how you can use it to overcome some of these problems. So why do I care about teaching so much, and why do I always loved it? And it has to do with this. I think that teaching is very primal for humans, right? We are a storytelling organism. We love to tell stories. That's why you're here listening to me having this presentation. This is why you read a book. This is why you would be interested in hearing experiences from other people, because it's so embedded in our being that we love to teach. We're having some glitch. I think it's if I stand on the cable. And you see that it's very old that we do this, right? And it's a really core value, and I also really feel that way. Especially when I look at like great teachers. So does anybody know who these people are? Who's the guy? Richard Feynman, right? He's the very famous physicist. He was very famous for his Feynman lectures that allowed students to understand really hard, like quantum level physics. And he's an amazing teacher, and we'll definitely get back to him. Does anybody know who the woman is? She's a physics teacher on YouTube, right? And she looks a bit crazy there, with a knife through a potato and a hammer and smiling. And that's also the best example of her personality that I can give you. I really recommend, if you type in crazy physics lady, you'll get her. Like I don't even have to tell you her name. Her name is quite hard. I think she's, I'm gonna try Tatiana Erkimova. Sure. But she's lovely. She has this program where she teaches physics to kids in this crazy way, where she's rambling and screaming and running around, and there's like water splashing over the stage. It's really wonderful. And I just think that that's really valuable, because I think who here has like a favorite teacher that they remember very fondly? Like, I definitely got one, right? So if you never had that experience, I think it's a real shame, because I think everybody deserves in their life to have like a great teacher that inspires you. And I think it can be life-changing to have a good teacher. Universities used to be very proud of this fact, but even now in modern days, they kind of forgot about it, right? Like teaching should be one of the main pillars of universities, but nowadays it's mostly research because there's more funding, and the teaching is left to teaching assistants, right? So I think that's also a shame, and I really think that being a great teacher is something we all should aspire to. So that's my personal motivation, but why might you care, right? And I think that teaching can make you grow as a leader. It is always inspiring to see a very skilled developer do something really cool, whether it's fixing a bug, implementing a new feature, or like showing you quickly how to like analyze something, opening Honeycomb, and all of this cool stuff. So that's the first part. Like you want to be inspiring, but also you want to increase the empathy. So often in companies, there's a large, what I call like fear gap between what juniors dare to ask and what they should ask to a senior. And why do they do this? Because the senior is too busy. The senior might be an asshole. It happens. It might be intimidating to ask questions, right? And in the bootcamps that I taught, I think the main reason why I saw students fail was because they were afraid to ask questions. If you have a student and they're afraid to ask questions, you're already lost as a teacher, right? So if you teach and if you start to appreciate teaching a lot, it can actually like help lower these barriers. Take a junior or take somebody else that can benefit from learning something from you and show them that you are willing to teach them and to help them. I think it really can improve how you are seen as a leader and how you are people there to interact with you. So I think that's a very big plus. I noticed this in the beginning of these boot camps where students are very afraid to ask me questions, and at the end they're like fighting over my attention. And I'm really happy when that happens because it means that I've lowered these barriers, right? It's very important to do. Fear is the mind killer as well, right? If you're scared to ask a question, you're not going to learn anything because you're actually scared to learn and to make mistakes. This is also, right? The fear to make mistakes is really a big one that we have to overcome. So one thing you can also do as a teacher in this matter is make mistakes obvious, show them, right? Because we all make mistakes. And sometimes we try to act like we don't because we're super seniors. But we shouldn't. We should just show our mistakes, right? Show that you also do these mistakes. It forces you to explain complex stuff in a simple way, right? Because now you have to explain it to someone. And that is a really useful skill if you're doing any client-facing work, right? Because your client often is not that technical. And if you are capable of like taking something hard, right? We have to do this very big refactor that will cost you a lot of money. We have to reconsider our architecture. This feature will take us this and this long because the complexity is here, right? If you can explain it in a simple way, it actually makes you a very valuable client-facing dev. So the other thing that you do, and this is like the golden grail, right? Is if every senior would enable everybody else to do better. Right, if you can like get that, what I call knowledge cascade, right? Because we're front-enders after all, and enable others to do better. You can make your seniors, make your meteors, teach your juniors, right? And it can like spread over your team and elevate the whole team, right? That's super awesome to do. It's hard, but if you never teach, you will never get there, right? So it's really a way to get to that those benefits. This is a very interesting one. This is one that I didn't expect, but I've noticed it in my current work where I've been like teaching teammates, and I have a very good like overall overview of what my teammates are really good at and what they struggle with. And that's super useful if you're like a team lead, because now you can like match people to specific projects, or you can say, hey, you're really good at this point, I need you to help me debug this. It really enables you to be like an effective leader. I once saw a student that went to a healthcare company, and they had this concept of a hero project, where the team lead would say, well, I know you're struggling with, for example, telemetry or like front-end work, and we're going to give you a project that exactly like will hurt you in that spot, right? This is your hero project. You have to do this in order to like elevate that skill, because they were aware that that skill was lacking, and they actually tried to actively help it. So pretty cool stuff. All of this, right, comes down to you have to make the time for it. And I know that everybody's busy, and everybody has deadlines, and everybody has code problems. But you don't have to go like full in 100%, right? You can like gradually scale this up, try to teach more, try to be a better leader. Growing as a developer. So here's our friend again, Richard Feynman. And he's famous for this quote, if you want to master something, teach it. Right? It was like one of his core beliefs. He has written a great book called Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman. Highly recommend it. It also talks about this and how he would like disassemble radios to understand how they work, and then explain his 12-year-old neighbor how the radio worked, so that he would understand better how the radio worked. Right? So that helps you grow as a developer. And when you teach things, and I noticed this myself, so I didn't do React when I started teaching, and then all of a sudden I had to teach React. But it was a really quick way to learn React, because I had to force myself to face the things I didn't know, because those would hurt when I was teaching. We'd be like, yeah, so how does that re-rendering work? I don't know, actually. So I had to like revisit it. So it really helps you identify knowledge gaps for yourself, right, as a developer. Like, what are the things that I struggle myself with? Those are probably the things you also have a hard time explaining to a student. Awkward abstractions in your code base can also be identified, right? If it's hard to explain, it's probably like a bit awkward, or there was a wrong abstraction, or like some weird code choices were made. And they will also feel very awkward when you have to explain them to somebody else. right? So that's also another benefit that you can learn. And general, like, teaching is basically simplifying stuff for students, right? And then normally we would call it lying, but when teaching we call it teaching, right? But like just finding out where complexity is hidden, and then like hiding that for your student also tells you something about where that complexity is, right? Like it's a two-way thing. So that's a really good thing to do, and being able to explain something is being able to think about that thing, right? Like I think that it's kind of the same concept. So this is the Feynman technique in a like little diagram. So you learn something, you explain it to a 12-year-old, you identify your gaps, you simplify and review the topic again, and you keep doing that, right? So this is also why I recommend everybody to, if you start teaching, make it an effort to teach the same thing over and over again, because you will refine your understanding over time if you keep doing that. Don't like try always to teach something new. It can be quite helpful to try the same lesson with different people multiple times. Another thing where you see this is in the Zen of Python, which is like this philosophy of Python. And I think like a couple of rules down, it says this: if the implementation is hard to explain, it is a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea, right? That may is very important. But you see that feeling of like, who here thinks that they can recognize like elegant code? No, now everybody's scared, right? But I think that like you have taste, right? When you see some code, you're like, I like that. When you see other code, I don't like that, right? You have like a feeling that can be weird, but it's hard to describe where that comes from. And I think you can refine that feeling by teaching more, because you can like actually see why you think some ideas are good and why some ideas are bad. So that's how you can grow as a developer. Now the next part is why you should care about teaching: improving your developer culture. This is not about you personally, but this is about your team, the dynamics inside of your company. And again, I know everybody's busy and you don't always have the time to do this, but imagine that you had the time, infinite resources, and you could really start kicking down on this. Onboarding, right? If you already have a culture where people are teaching each other, onboarding becomes a lot easier, because now the facilities are already there. This really gets exaggerated if you have a culture where you record those teaching sessions, right? Because now you're building a knowledge base, like a video material, and then people can watch it in 2 times the speed. It's very useful for them. Teaching as a documentation tool, right? You can like build your documentation like this. If you have to explain something 3 or 4 times, you will be able to write proper documentation and do a better job of putting it in text. My throat is a bit painful. Inspire others and be inspired, right? So what you don't want to do in your developer culture is have developers that say, I'm really scared to learn something new from person X because then I know that they are better than me. And this is a very common sentiment, more common than you think. And maybe you have it yourself, and maybe you are able to acknowledge that, but I think it's important to realize that facilitating this like growth mindset in your team and making sure that everybody is on board with like learning new things and is not scared to learn new things, because it's painful to learn something new, right? You get like ripped out of your comfort zone, you're gonna be put into this valley of unknowingness, you don't know anything, and then slowly you're gonna creep out. It's important to have that culture and to be able to inspire others to also inspire you, right? Beginner's mindset, I think this is really important and also hits on that topic. You should always be looking like being a beginner is really fun if you have the beginner's mindset. If you don't have the beginner's mindset, it's really painful. And I've seen this happen with bootcamp students, because often they come from different backgrounds. So they have been like an architect, or they have been a supply manager, or whatever job they come from. And they were like masters of their domain, right? They were experts in their domain. And then at some point they decided, I want to switch my career to development. And now all of a sudden they're not masters of the domain. It's a very painful domain, right? Because you have to learn all this code. And they are like, they go in a block, or they stop like thinking, or they are very scared to make mistakes. And the first thing I do with them is like talk about, hey, we should have a beginner's mindset. We are just gonna acknowledge that something is hard, and we have to like get back into this awkward feeling of not knowing what we're doing. And then slowly over time, we'll get better. You could also like simplify it to this, which I think is very true, right? Like the first step to being good at something is actually being bad at something. Another thing in developer culture is this. Who has worked in a project where this was the case? Right? Most people. Not everybody, but a lot of people, right? So what happens when that person gets hit by a bus? Right? This is called the bus factor, right? I think it's a common concept. Like how many people have to be hit to a bus until your project falls down? And this is a serious problem, right? Because what if that single developer decides to find a new job, right? And they give their notice and they're gone within a month. Now you're like scrambling to get this knowledge out of them, because otherwise your project will fall down. It's very costly as well. I think the solution should be, we should force that developer to teach the others before they get hit by the bus or before they leave, right? It's quite important. So in short, teaching makes you grow as a leader and a developer. And adding teaching to your developer culture, integrating it there has some benefits. You improve onboarding and you reduce knowledge islands. I would say that that's the main two arguments. And also this is, if you are really interested in doing this is a great argument to tell your boss, right? Like, hey boss, we can like fix these problems that we have. And also keep the beginner's mindset, I think, should be the last point, but I forgot. So there we go. So that's why you should care about teaching, right? And then now let's go into some tips for actually teaching. And the first thing I'm going to say is that I will not be able to give you tips that will work for everyone here, because I think teaching is also a very personal thing. You are a person and you have a personality, and that comes with a teaching style. Maybe you're very precise, and maybe you're very like me, like I'm very chaotic. I like to go everywhere. I would always have this moment where I would tell students, today is a short lecture, and everybody would like, oh, it's not going to be a short lecture, because it's going to be, we're going to go everywhere, right? So this is very personal. So the first thing that I would like to say is like, you have a teaching style, and you have to embrace that. So everybody teaches differently, and you have to figure out what works for you personally. And that can be a lot of different things, right? It can be that you like to be in front of a classroom, or like a group of people, or you like to teach one-on-one, or you prefer to like write documentation. It's all valid forms of teaching. Or you like to record videos of yourself doing something. Also very common, very nice tool. And I think that there is this fear sometimes for people to become teachers or to like teach, because they feel like they aren't expert enough. And I think that's a shame, because I think that's, again, fear. So it's interesting to think about how you can overcome that, right? The first thing that people have to know is that teaching is actually something you can learn. It's a skill like any other. You just have to do it often and practice, practice, practice. Be aware of what you're doing, reflect on your own teaching. Recording yourself is also great for this. It's super awkward to watch yourself teach. It's so awkward, but you have to do it. It's really helpful, and it really tells you a lot about your personal style. And over time, as you do it often and often, you also build like a collection of tools, right? So I have like for my web dev course, I know all the tools by heart, and I can reproduce them in Spanish, or I can do them backwards. I know them so well. I've done them so many times. But they are my collection of tools, and they won't work for everybody. They won't work for a different teacher. This is also why you should teach the same thing many times again to build up this collection, right? Because the first time maybe you have to explain like GraphQL or Angular rendering cycles or whatever you want to teach. You will make a lot of mistakes and you'll be confused, and as you do it more, you will refine it and also refine your understanding. Share your teaching goals with your student. This is like a super simple fix that everybody can do. When you start teaching something, you say, today we're going to try to learn X and Y. Today we're going to try to learn Angular and Angular rendering. Because it sets expectations. And now you're working together to get to the goals instead of you like being the master that's shoving information down, right? Like it creates a collaboration. It's very important to create that openness. The student and teacher roles can be and should be flipped. That should be actually there, can and should be, right? I think that if you teach somebody else, there's always something you can learn back from them. And you should make an effort to organize that, because I think it creates a level playing field, so to say. And a beginner's mindset again, right? So one of the things that happened with me for my teaching style is that I told you I'm very chaotic, and I love to teach the same subject in different ways. And that really confuses students that do the course twice because they come back and they're like, oh, last time you did it differently. And then they say, but the test is the same. And I would say, yeah, but the answers are different, right? And they don't like it at all when you do that, but it's fun. And I will tell you something more about how you can teach students like that. So this is your teaching style, right? Very personal thing. You should develop it for yourself. How are we doing on time? Do you have the time? Because I forgot to start my timer.
25 minutes.
Ah, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Perfect.
20 minutes.
Perfect. So that's your teaching style. So now is my first practical tip. Does anybody know this gentleman? I would be surprised if you do. No? This individual is called Seymour Papert. Does anybody ring a bell now in this age and day of AI? No. He actually wrote a book called Perceptrons together with Minsky. Like basically the book that enabled all these nice AI tools we have today. He wrote it. But that was not the only thing he did. He also wrote this book called Mindstorms and a couple of others. Lego Mindstorms, anybody had that set, those sets? Really cool. Like he had robots in Lego and they could like move. That's based on his book actually. Like he wrote that. And what Paper did, he developed a system and a programming language called Logo to teach kids how to program. But not for the sake of teaching them how to program, but for the sake of teaching them other stuff. So when I was teaching these kids, I would also do this, where I would say, today we're going to make like a simulation of how ants move through an anthill. And we're going to do it in code. Not to teach them how to do code, but to teach them the intricacies of that system, right? Because it's a very complex self-replicating aware system where ants like put down little markers, pheromones, and then they read those. It's very cool. And you can actually program that. And at the end of the day, you have kids that know a little bit of code, but they know much more about ants now. And they were super happy to do it as well. I also had this in a classroom where like the subject was animal preservation, and two boys, they made a game to shoot elephants. And then at the end they said, don't do this. That was like their solution to the problem. Quite interesting. And what I want to say about that is situated learning means you want to make the learner motivated to learn. You want to put them in a situation where it's actually relevant for them to learn. Because who remembers Pythagoras? Right? When you were in high school, you were not situated. You did not care about this, probably, right? Like, why do we learn it? Why do we care? And that leads to less motivated student and to less effective teaching. That's also why it's so sad that high school is the exact time in your life that you don't want to learn and you have to learn a lot, right? So learning works best when the student wants to learn something. And that sounds like a very obvious statement, but if you take it like at face value and you really take it into consideration, it can help you actually come up with better lessons. As a more senior dev, don't assume the problem that you're trying to solve is clear, right? You have paid the blood money. You have like spent all these hours and days debugging an application or writing vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before React came along, and you know what it solves, right? In other industries, that's just called PTSD, but we like call it experience. And it's not effective to teach somebody that is not convinced of the problem. Right? So you have to sell them the problem that you're trying to solve. Why would you teach somebody GraphQL if they have never seen how painful a REST API can be? Right? Or how are you going to teach somebody React if they've never seen how painful like vanilla HTML, JavaScript, and CSS can be? Right? How are you going to do that? So selling the problem is actually quite important, and selling the problem is a different way of saying situated learning. We have to make the learner care. So you either sell the problem or you pick your moment. Picking your moment we'll get back to. Let's start to selling the problem, right? So one thing I did with my students is, for example, who here has done React hook forms? Knows about it? It's a way to do forms, right? Why do we use React hook forms?
Simplifying life.
It simplifies life. Before your life wasn't simple, right? So if I want to explain to you React hook forms, I first have to like show you that your life was not simple. So what I would do with my students, I would just let them mess around with vanilla forms for a week. And then after a week, I would tell them, but now, there is something else, right? And they were all miserable because they were solved the problem. They were actually convinced that this would solve their problem, right? So it's very important to think about this. So this is some examples that we have, right? So how would you explain map if you've never done a for loop? It's very weird to do. But a lot of courses do it. A lot of courses just skip the for loop. And it's weird because you're like, what are we actually teaching, right? REST GraphQL, and there we go, my example. So if this is like this is the best scenario. If you can do this, you can like let somebody struggle for a week or a couple of months, but it's very mean in a company setting, right? In a school, it's fine, but if you're gonna like not tell your colleague about this awesome tool you have just to make them struggle, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. You can try. So there is this other way where you can try to explain the problem, right? You can tell them like, look at this vanilla form, it's horrible, but I don't think it's as powerful as experience. It's much harder to do. But it can be done if you're good at it. And sometimes it has to be done because you simply don't have the time to let them pay the blood money. So another thing you can do is like, wouldn't it be cool if we never have undefined as not a function again, right? A carrot, there's a carrot on a stick in front of you. Like, look at this, like wouldn't it be cool if we never had that? That's like an argument to learn TypeScript, right? That's really cool. If the front end decides what the payload is, GraphQL, right? Like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? That's way better than I'm gonna teach you GraphQL today, right? No, let's think about this problem first. We made the robot draw stuff, and this is going back to the kids. So one of the things that we did with the kids is we would give them this super simple robot that we built. There would be a pen sticking through it, and you can put it on paper. And then you can give the robot instructions like move forward 10 steps, and turn left 60 degrees, and move forward 20 steps. That's actually that Logo programming language. And what happened then is that all of a sudden these primary school kids become super interested in what angles are, and degrees, and distances, and coordinates. So you see here on the right side, that paper, it's in Dutch, but it basically is like they've written out the whole program of what their robot should draw, right? And I remember when I gave this lesson, it took like 2 hours with these students. This is the robot, by the way. It still looked like a bomb. Later we had a nicer version. But I still remember when these students, we did the scores, and 2 hours later the teacher came back, and she's like, did you take a break? And like, oh no, we forgot. And she was so surprised that we got all of these like primary school kids to do 2 hours of focused work, right? Because they were really motivated to get this robot to draw the right thing. So it's a very powerful concept if you can get your learner to be motivated. And I think that's also why I recommend teaching kids, because their enthusiasm is too big to, like, it's so good to help them do stuff like this. It's really cool. So picking your moments is, I think, the other solution to selling the problem, and this is actually really useful in a company setting. So when you are asked to write documentation, you can say, no, I'm going to teach and I'm going to record it, and that's going to be our first draft of the documentation. I think that the last step should always be a video. I think that's really useful, but it can be a good first step first to just like record a video and then write documentation based out of that, because it's real world, it's tested, you've had it with a student. A code review or refactor is a great moment to like pick somebody up when you see a mistake being made in a code review. Like, that's a moment where you can say, okay, this is really relevant for you to learn this now, let's take this moment, you're probably solved on the problem already. And when you get a question, also very simple, but very good to think about, like, hey, this person has been asking me a lot about GraphQL lately, maybe I should like teach them what it is. And pair program more. I think in general we do that not enough because we're busy. It's a shame, but I get it, we're busy. Yeah, so that is like situated learning, right? How do we get our learners to learn? By making them motivated. So either pick your moments or sell them the problem. Build upon existing knowledge, right? This is an idea by a guy named Piaget, who was a development educational psychologist, and he says, like, the way that humans learn is called schema learning, and we learn things by associating it with things we already know. You can imagine that somebody that already has played tennis is easier to learn badminton, right? Because the knowledge transfer between those domains is pretty good. So if we can like sneak in this schema learning into what we teach, it's quite good. So relating concepts to known concepts, great move. And also being aware that different students can come with a different set of concepts, right? If you have a front-ender in front of you, that's different than when you have a back-ender in front of you, or somebody that worked in like public companies, or somebody that worked on e-commerce. They all have different known concepts. Analogies can also work great. So for example, a TypeScript interface like a template, the TypeScript interface like a contract, a TypeScript interface like a shape. And you'd be surprised how different this can be per person. So I once had a student, he was a chef before, and I told him, like, a function, that's nothing else than like a recipe that refers to another recipe, right? So like to make a pie, you first have to make the pie crust. The pie crust can be like a function, and that code is just defined in a different book. And then all of a sudden for them it clicked because it was related to something they knew, right? Very practical example of if you have a chef in your team, now you know. Another thing that I would often do, and I'm starting to think if we should do it. No, we're not going to do it. But for example, HTTP, right, the protocol, you can explain it like a letter. It has a header and a body, and then there's like rules on how to send it, how to get it from A to B. And that's really powerful for people that have never talked about these things, never thought about how the internet actually works, to give them these analogies. So great tool as well. This is one of my famous tools. Students, some students hate this, some students love this. It's the hotel example. We have a lot of images like this. We used to have them in the course, where I would say like authentication is like checking into a hotel, right? You show your passport and you get like a key card. And that key card can be considered like your access token, your JWT or whatever you're using, your bearer token. And then when you go to a door, you actually present this token and it's going to validate if that's actually the right token, and then you can enter, right? Like some students this really helps, other students are like confused week 6, like what was with the hotel again? So it's really important to know like what works and what doesn't. And you're going to confuse people in the beginning. I did so many times. And I also had this period where I was like backing down on it. I was like, no, it's really, you are the problem here, but it doesn't work. Function over concept. So I'm going to skip over this quite a bit. It is, we are very passionate people when we talk about code, right? And we love to like throw around definitions. We love it. It's great as a developer. So this is like how you would be able to define a REST API, right? So the REST API is from Wikipedia. And this is like describing what the thing is, but you are missing like what do we use it for, right? So I can just say, you use a REST API to get data and JSON from a server. Which of these two do you think sticks better with a student? Probably the second one, right? We can go back to the first one later when it becomes relevant, but we have to think about function over concept. So we should try to explain things by their function and not by their concept. HTTP, the same. So here you can see two great resources. On the left we have the Vercel documentation on Next.js, which I think, who likes Vercel's documentation? Right? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, who actively dislikes Vercel? Okay, so you have 2 people for or against. You will fight afterwards. I think that a reason why Next.js is actually winning, because a lot of developers like their docs. At least I do like their docs. And you can see that the way that they structure it, right? So they immediately explain what you use it for. The Next.js image component extends the HTML element for an automatic image optimization, and then they show you how to use it, function, right? And MDN, Mozilla Development Network documentation, does the same thing for the image element, right? The Next.js page, right? It says, second sentence, Next.js enables you to create high-quality web applications with the power of React components. That tells you a lot about what you use it for. It's not a description of what it is, but what do you use it for. And then if you go to WordPress, they describe what they are and not what you use it for. And I think it would be much more powerful if WordPress said, with WordPress, you can build a website without code, or have like a content management platform for your website, right? It's a much more powerful thing, and marketing people know this. And they've started to pick it up in development as well. Teaching and AI. I think I can be... I wanted to talk about this because I cannot not do it. So this is a picture from the 70s about like how schools in the future would look like, right? Where the teacher is grinding up some books, and then the student has to still manually, I love that, like manually crank that thing, right? We got all these wires, but no electromotors. So the poor student has to grind these books into a fine dust, and then it gets sent over these wires directly into the heads of the students. Wouldn't it be great, right? Have you ever tried sleeping on a book before a test? Some people do this, right? Like you open the book on your pillow. Maybe it's like osmosis into your brain. And there's a funny thing that I studied AI here in Utrecht back in 2011 when nobody believed that neural networks would ever be a thing. And one of the things that is interesting, that AI and teaching are actually trying to solve the same problem, which is knowledge compression. When I teach something, I have all this knowledge in my brain in some sort of form. Let's say that it's like numbers or whatever, and I'm speaking to you by compressing it, because I cannot explain you line by line what's happening in my brain. And now you're going to take that compressed information and you're going to decompress it, right? And an AI is doing exactly the same, right? It's taking a lot of information, the internet, LLMs, right, ChatGPT, then compressing it down, and then we have like these models that are like 4 or 5 gigabytes, and they know about everything. That's a compression, right? It's a very powerful one, and AI is actually trying to solve that. That's also what got me from my studies, like how I was able to sell it to my teachers that I was doing teaching all the time, because I also wrote my bachelor's thesis about teaching. And I said, like, yeah, it's the same problem. It's just the same thing. So I have a little son now, and I call him my little LLM. AI is an amazing tool, and I think it's here to stay, and I think it will have a large impact on our industry. I don't think that we are so sure about what it will do to junior developers yet. I think that the experiment is still out, and I suspect it will not be pretty, because the temptation of it is too big to just like let it generate code for you. And maybe that's fine. Maybe in the future that is fine to do, but I still think you should be careful for it, because I've seen students that like are really good when they use it, and they really help it to like explain them topics, right? Because you can use an AI to like explain to me how HTTP works or REST APIs. But then the next question will always be, do you want me to show you how to implement a REST API, right? Like that's always what happens with these systems, and it's very tempting to say yes there. So be careful, and don't underestimate the human factor when you're teaching, right? I think it's really like nice and motivating to talk to a human and to have that interaction. And I also think like in real life teaching should be the norm. It's the best. I always like when my students are in class. I hate remote teaching, but sometimes you have to, but I think that the human factor is really important. Time-wise, 2 minutes? Then I'm gonna wrap up here. I have some tools, so I guess you know this one, live share, to share your screen and to just go together. If you wanna record, I recommend Open Broadcaster software. It's open source. It allows you to set up really nice scenes. This is my favorite tool, TL Draw. It's a website where you can draw, and it has really good tools to like make diagrams, and I think it's a really useful tool in teaching, because drawing and teaching are super useful to combine. So, how to teach? Develop your own style of teaching, motivate students, build upon existing knowledge, function over concept, right, and keep a beginner's mindset. Celebrate wins, share feedback, make it rewarding, and have fun. Thank you so much.
So basically, everyone is a teacher, right?
Yes, there you go.
So just find your style and give it on to the next person.
Exactly.
Is that what you also find when you're working for a company, that you can apply these principles?
I'm going to do the experiment now at lab. Yeah. So this is where I'm really excited to do. I've tried, so I've made an effort. So one thing that happens if you are a teacher and you start working at a company, like all the interns and juniors start like flocking around you, because like you are known as like, hey, this guy knows how to do that. And I think I already learned quite a lot, and it's super valuable to do this. Because as a company, if you can properly handle juniors and bring them to a higher level, that's a very valuable thing to have. Because now you have your own pipeline. I think it's always more valuable if somebody is trained in company, on your stack, on your techniques, with your people, than if you get them from somewhere else. So there's a lot of benefit there. But we'll see. The experiment will be done, I hope.
Yeah, it's nice that you have like a very big bag of different techniques to try it out, and yeah, you're very right that everybody can find its own style and
For sure.
apply it.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice insights. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Any other questions, maybe? Let's enjoy a beer. Oh no, after the next one.